Darling, family legend tells that my dad knew the minute that I was born, and he was in the waiting room at NAS Hospital about halfway across the hospital. This is according to him. He tells a really good story. Happy Sabbath, everybody. I don't know about you, but it's been a really hot and sweaty week for me. But we have been enjoying the rain. How are your gardens growing? Growing well? Ours is growing well, Mommy, just trust me. Well, it is a pleasure to be with you again. I apologize for missing last month. Dad was in the hospital. He's out of the hospital now. Yay! And actually, to that end, are there any prayer requests for this morning? Muti? That Dimitri finds a job. And let me find some scrappy bit of, okay. My nephew, her grandson, just moved to Florida. Yes, we are so excited. He's 24 years old. He wants to pursue his pilot's license. And he needs a job to be able to fund this adventure. So we're putting him on the prayer list. What other prayer requests do we have this morning? Yay! And I bet we can add the grandson on the prayer list while he's off in boot camp. He went to the Air Force Boot Camp Academy. We are so proud of him. Say again? Jaden? Okay. If I'm not prying, what all is wrong?
He got surgery for the
Oh, surgery always sucks. I am about to regale you with the tale of my dad's time in the hospital. He went in on May 28th to have surgery. They took out parts of 4 ribs, 1 lobe of lung, and a tumor about the size of a baseball. The recovery from that was not short and free of complications. So, yeah, that was almost a month worth of doing night watch. I am so glad he's home and I can sleep in my own bed. And he is doing better. He is now walking around on room air during the day and only uses the breathing doo-wop-y at night. So much better. And he already has plans to start gardening again in a few months and run the river run, and there is no way he's beating his grandson, Dimitri. Nice try, not gonna happen. But that is a praise on our side. I'm just writing it down because what you hear coming from me today will be from God, because my brain, function is less than I'd like it to be this morning. We're going in like 900 directions, and I will try to settle down a little bit better and be more focused in about 30 seconds. Would you all pray with me, please? Dearest Father in heaven, thank you for the Sabbath. It is so nice to wind down and do something a little bit different than our everyday. Dear Lord, thank you greatly for being with us this week, for the sun and the rain, and for the growing things. Dear Lord, please help Dimitri find a job. Thank you very much that Miss Nellie has finished her chemo. Dear Lord, please be with Jaden while he's off at boot camp. That is a rather trying time for many a young man and woman. Dear Father, please be with Miss Maria's grandmother as she's recovering from her surgery. That is never fun when you're cut. It's usually helpful, but it's never fun. Dear Lord, thank you for helping Da with his recovery, and please be with him as he continues to recover, and please just be with him. Dearest Father in heaven, may your presence be with us as we study your word today. May our minds be open so that we understand what you want us to know. Amen. Well, shall we go for a walk through the Bible today? We're not going to cover a great whopping lot of territory, but we're going to cover a lot of fun, interesting things. So, the title of today's lesson is A Day in the Ministry of Jesus. Mark has a distinctly different tone from all of the other Gospels. Last week we heard about how Mark was this young man, when we first started this, it was last week, was a young man, and Paul didn't like him because he couldn't hang with the big boys and went back to Jerusalem. So we're gathering from that he was in the youngish sort of range. And I bet there isn't a generation since Adam that hasn't looked at the generation there and gone, they don't know what it's like. Well, this is true. You don't until you have been, in the midst of discomfort and having to do things that are painful and just soldier on, which is a lot of what boot camp is about. It's not fun. So, and a lot of the difference in the voice of Mark, scholarly minds believe, and I'm pulling from my history in Walla Walla, where we had a lot of professors who had wonderful ideas about who the apostles were. John Mark was a youngish guy, but he wasn't speaking directly to the older Jews. He was what they would, if I'm remembering correctly, feel free to correct me. He was considered a Hellenistic Jew, basically one of the kids who grew up under Roman rule. So to him, under Roman rule was, and this is life. Kind of like our kids today who grow up with all this social media bombarding them, and they're like, but this is normal. It's not normal to go out in the garden and not have 900 things buzzing in my ears. So I strongly suspect that his audience was not the elders of the church. It was the kids. And God bless them, we needed that. And in fact, we need that today. Mark loves to he loves to focus on the supernatural aspect of Jesus. I'm part God, and he's not part God, he is both. But trying to get that proportion in our brain tends to short out. So this is a deity come down to earth apostle. And that's exciting and that's neat. And his letter moves very quickly. He loves the word immediately. Jesus did not sit around and contemplate a whole bunch in Mark's gospel. So let's look at this. So he's describing one of the first, whether it is the very first one or not, it is really not a point of salvation, but one of the first Sabbaths of Jesus' ministry. And he starts this out by assembling the team. So in chapter 1, verse 16, I'm going to call on a few people to read, but I'm going to get it started. Mom, you ready when I call on you? Outstanding. So, verse 16. And as he walked by the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. Then Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men." They immediately left their nets and followed him. So here's two brothers fishing. Jesus says, "Follow me," and off they go. Very action-oriented. This would appeal to a young person. When he had gone a little farther from there, he saw James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, who also were in the boat mending their nets. And immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired servants and went after him. So this is still the Pied Piper going along the road. Hey, come follow me, and here comes the prey. It's neat. I mean, the visual that Mark is giving is very action-oriented, very immediate, very bullet point is what we would call it today. What are the impressions that you guys are getting from the way Mark is introducing the apostles who will become disciples, or the guys who will become disciples? Mom said that they were willing. All four of these guys, actually two sets of brothers, were willing to just drop everything and go. And that's probably a good example for us today. Are we willing to hear the voice of God and go, okay, stop what we're doing here and go? Mom, could you read 21 and 22?
Then he went into Capernaum, and immediately on the Sabbath, he entered the synagogue and taught. And they were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes.
Oh, that's interesting. Again, we're hearing immediately. Mark doesn't like to set the scene with a lot of flowery, and there was a hill in the background, and there was this tree, and there was that flower. He's very much all about the verbs, which I understand from the profs over at Walla Walla that this was a very Roman type of thing. You were interested in the action. The plot mattered. Making things move forward mattered. So Mark says immediately, almost all the time. So we're going from, we've gathered four guys, to we're going into the synagogue. on the Sabbath, and he's teaching. But he's not going, well, Rabbi so-and-so said this, and Rabbi the other said that, and Scribe who's-he what's-it said the other thing. He's going, okay, when you read the scriptures, guys, this is what it's saying. Isn't it neat to hear? So that tells me something really interesting about the culture way back when. The scribes and the Pharisees, while they walked around going, well, everyone should believe me because I'm telling you the truth, because I'm a Pharisee or I'm a scribe and I'm this terribly holy person. And yet they're quoting each other to basically back up what they're saying. So if we're seeing that in our media today, well, we should be a little concerned about that, shouldn't we? And apparently it's nothing new, because it was happening well over 2,000 years ago when the scribes and the Pharisees were doing it. But here was a guy who actually, a speaker in front of this crowd at the synagogue, who had voice. It wasn't, well, maybe, kind of, sort of, vaguely. And it might be and it might not be, and I'm just giving myself all kinds of wiggle room just in case what I'm saying is wrong. Well, I warned you ahead of time that it might be. He's saying, no, when I'm reading this is actually what it says. When I'm saying this is what the scripture is saying, no, really, it's right there. So, right off the bat, Jesus is at least one of his very first public speaking engagements. He sets himself apart from the rank and file of the religious elite. What do you see, Mom?
As if he's having authority, not hesitantly. He's speaking powerfully, and people are believing the power that he is exuding.
Do we believe today that when we hear something true, we can know that it's true? Hey, there's room for, kind of, sort of, maybe on this one. What are your thoughts on it, Madame? Oh, but please wait for the microphone so that the people on the internet can hear us.
To know whether something is true or false, you have to know the genuine thing. It's just like to know a counterfeit note, you have to know what the genuine note. You can't be studying counterfeit, because counterfeit will always be changing and coming in different forms. But if you know the genuine thing, you will be able to identify it. If you hear the gospel preached, you can know what is right and what is wrong in that preached sermon, if you know what the Bible states. So it's telling us something. For us to be able to identify what is truth, we have to know the truth.
I'm good with that. If we thoroughly, if we know what's written in here, if the folks back then knew what was in this bit, not the 600 articles and treatises on that bit, but that, then they could recognize when someone was speaking and going, okay, This is the real thing, guys. This is really what it was intended. And our ear can know that. So, at the end of times, we are told in the Old Testament and the New Testament that there are folks who will be deceived because that's what they wanted. That's a cautionary tale for each and every single one of us. Your mind has to be open to what is really true. Study what we know is really true so that we know when someone's lying to us. Use our common sense. God gave us brains so that the neurons really could fire. So if someone is saying something that sounds wildly complicated, are we sure? And pray for our fellow man, that our fellow man, and most especially for us, that we will want to receive the truth God has for each and every single one of us, so that we're not lied to, so that we're not deceived. Because there certainly is a lot of, and there always has been, a lot of stuff out there that you can choose to believe, whether it's real or not. Moving on. Let's see. Miss Nellie, could you please read the next passage? Oh, my bad. Okay. So who else has a Bible so that I can pick on you to read the next bit? Okay. Let's get you a microphone in just a second, and we'll go. Oh, that's so kind of you. And I promise, no one bites unless asked very nicely. Could we please get her a microphone so that she can read? We're going to go from 23 to 28.
23 to 28. And I'm going to be reading from the New International Version.
Excellent.
It's on. Verse 23. Just then, a man in the synagogue who was possessed by an impure spirit cried out, "What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." "Be quiet," Jesus said sternly. "Come out of him." The impure spirit shook the man violently and came out of him with a shriek. The people were all so amazed that they asked each other, "What is this? A new teaching, and with authority? He even gives orders to impure spirits, and they obey him?" News about him spread quickly over the whole region of Galilee.
Okay, we found a version that did not say immediately. There is nothing wrong with having fun within the Bible. After all, God has fun with us. Every now and then he goes, "Oi," too, I'm sure. As every parent who has ever had a child knows, and he's had all of us. So we're in the synagogue. He's just given a sermon that has everyone going. And there's this man in the synagogue, sitting in the pews with an unclean spirit. Now, that part kind of grabbed my attention right there. So we're not talking about outside in the courtyard. We're not talking about in the marketplace. We're not talking about where the bad people meet. Here is a guy in the pews, in the church, in the synagogue, with an unclean spirit. And two wonderful things have happened here. We've let some, the folks way back when who we have a really bad habit of prejudicing ourselves against, that, oh, those folks didn't recognize the Son of God. Do we every single time? So these folks, way back when, with the bad rep for always looking down their noses at folk, have in their midst a poor sinner guy who has an unclean spirit in him. This is a good thing. This is what we should be today. We want the folks who haven't quite already got it all right yet. They're not polished up yet. Because guess what? That's each and every single one of us. It was a hospital for sinners, and there was one right there. Isn't that kind of cool? And here's something even more interesting. The bad spirit, the bad guy, the bad side immediately recognizes Jesus. I think Mark's rubbing off on me. And he's crying out. He's saying, he's announcing that here is the Son of God. Here is the Mighty One. Here is a divine one. He's being ID'd by the other side. Isn't that an interesting way to make that sound legitimate? And I'm not saying that it needs to, okay. The way I phrased that was probably really bad. But the general gist is, okay, so to use an example from today, if you want to know who a terrorist, if you want to know who the Mossad agent is, ask the terrorist, because they know. And here is this terrorist announcing, you're the good guy, and you're a head good guy. And Jesus is going, quiet, out. And he does it. Mark is fascinated with the supernatural powers of Jesus, the Son of God. And he's sharing that. It's not just whatever meager things we can do with our hands, humans. And we can do some pretty impressive things when we put our minds and energy to it. But here is a being who is also divine, who is also supernatural. And that's neat. We can revel in that and enjoy it and call on it. The bad guys knew who he was. And here are all the good guys going, who's this? This sounds like another cautionary tale to me. Beware of thinking you're too much the good guy, and beware of this. I only want my truth to be this. It is important for us to have an open mind about what we read and hear and compare one thing to the other so that we get a whole picture of who God is. None of the other Gospels picture Christ as quite the deity that Mark does, and that's so neat. Now, it does say that there was a little bit of drama in church that day, besides the fact that the speaker actually spoke with authority and told the evil spirit to actually get out. By modern Pentecostal standards, someone was speaking in tongues. the unclean spirit had convulsed him and cried out with a loud voice and came out of him. So he followed orders, but he made a show of doing it. And everyone in the congregation that day went, "Oh, how amazing!" And just like people do today, everybody talked. The most rapid form of communication on earth is gossip. And it still is today. And not only that, but we can get on our phone and we can gossip with anybody in the entire world on social media. It makes being able to question our sources an even more important thing than it ever was before. Oh, you heard this. Well, where did you hear it from? Or, well, I never heard that before. Okay, so where are you getting your information from that they didn't tell you this, that, or the other? God never minds us asking a question, especially when we're ready to hear his answer. Does anyone else have a Bible, and would they be willing to read the next passage? Okay, Mom. You're stuck with it. We're going to go start at 29 and go to 31.
Now, as soon as they had come out of the synagogue, they entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. But Simon's wife's mother lay sick with a fever, and they told him about her at once. So he came and took her by the hand, lifted her up, and immediately the fever left her. And she served them.
There is so much to enjoy in these few short verses. So here, Mark actually does set the scene just a little bit. He tells you the cast of characters. There's Jesus, there's Simon, there's Andrew, there's James, there's John, there's Simon's wife and Simon's mother-in-law in a little teeny house. We're assuming it's a little teeny house. It's at least one house. So they've all gathered together for an afternoon lunch, but we've got a problem. Mother-in-law is sick. Now this is before the age of penicillin, but not before the age of Inchinsia and other various and sundry herbs and spices that have been around since, the Garden of Eden. But it's still never a good thing, way back when, to have a fever. It's just not. This is before the age of air conditioning, y'all. And hey, people did live before that. Honest and true, they did. So here, another preconceived notion that we're running into at this. So we've got this cast of characters. We've got Simon's mother-in-law. Now, anyone who's ever been married and had a mother-in-law, is that always a fun relationship? Sometimes it can be, but apparently not always. And so they rush up to tell the master that mother-in-law is sick. Now, this is probably part because, you've got to tell somebody they're sick because it could spread. So stay away from mother-in-law. She's sick. We've got to keep her out. And Jesus, instead of going, oh my word, keep her away from me. Keep her away from me, because this is also way back when in Jewish culture, you kept the genders as separate until they got married, and then it was okay to be in the same house together. It's amazing how we can, swing from one side to the other as pendulums go and never manage to find the middle. Apparently, it's a human thing, not just an American thing. The idea of segregating gender as thoroughly as Jewish tradition does. And Jesus, in, again, a complete 180 from tradition. Instead of going, keep those germs away from me, goes right up to her, takes her by the hand and says, we want you to feel, feel better. So he gets her up, and not only does she get right up, fever's gone, germs are gone, she goes, well, here, let me get you lunch. There's a lot to just wrap our brains around, even though it's the action stuff, because that's Mark. He's writing to the young people. He's he's doing the action stuff because, hey, that's what he likes. And again, we've got healing. So we've got the healing in the morning with the casting out the spirit, and we've got the healing in the afternoon with mother-in-law and the fever. So let's read what happens next. Madame in the pink jacket, I'm afraid I don't know your name. What is your name?
I'm
Cheryl?
Cheryl. Yes, S-H-E-R-O.
Miss Sharon, could you please read 32 to 34?
And we are reading from Mark chapter 1, and we're reading verse 32, you said?
Yes, please.
32 to 34. And I'm reading from the New International Version. That evening after sunset, the people brought to Jesus all the sick and demon-possessed. The whole town gathered at the door. And Jesus healed many who had various diseases. He also drove out many demons, but he would not let the demons speak because they knew who he was.
So Mark's setting the scene again, but again, he's not doing a lot of dressing up the scene with, they're in the house and all that sort of stuff. It was, so by sunset on Sabbath, the whole town of Capernaum shows up at Simon's door going, I need to be healed. I got this sickness, I've got this illness, I've got this demon. And Jesus heals and casts out all evening long. We get now, check me if you have a different impression. It says they brought to him all who were sick and were demon-possessed. This doesn't sound like it was a little crowd to me. Does it sound like it might have been a little crowd to anybody?
Yes, it does.
It does sound like it could have been a little crowd?
It's a big crowd.
Big crowd?
They said all who were sick and demon-possessed.
And when you're talking about sick, you've got someone who's carrying them with them. So we have, I'm getting the picture that there, it was a pretty good-sized crowd. And there's some consistency here. Jesus heals them, and he's binding the demons. No, you don't get to talk. You don't get to influence or counter-influence my people. It's their job to recognize me without you saying anything. Since God has a tendency to be kind of consistent, I'll bet that's the same way he is today. He's not going to just let the bad guys speak. He's going to let us recognize him with our own eyes and our own experience. That's kind of a neat thing. Though we have to be looking for it to receive that experience. It's the ones who were actually, they had to put in the work. They had to go to Simon's house to get the healing. They had to be seeking it. Now, this is consistent. Jesus says, throughout his ministries, if you seek, you'll find. Come looking for me, I'm there. And that is a nifty thing, because it's still true today. If we go looking through his scriptures, he's there to be found. If we go looking for him in nature, he's there too. I will consistently say, and those who have been subjected to me more than once already know, I think nature is God's first book. It was there before this. But there are many beautiful things to be found in it, like the supernatural power of God who could speak an entire world into existence. That's a pretty big being. I don't care what his dimensions are. That's a pretty powerful creature. I don't care what he looks like. Someone who can speak, and there it was. And what Mark is trying to tell his audience is that that same powerful creator has sent the Son with the same kind of power. He can speak and the demons can't. He can heal, kind of like the prophets told us he would. So let's go ahead and read 35 to 39. Does anybody have a Bible?
And in the morning, rising up a great while before day, he went out and departed into a solitary place, and there prayed. And Simon and they that were with them followed after him. And when they had found him, they said unto him, All men seek for thee. And he said unto them, Let us go into the next towns, that I may preach there also, for therefore came I forth. And he preached in their synagogues throughout all Galilee, and cast out devils.
So something caught Mark's eye about the habits of Jesus. He prayed. And not only did he pray, he got up super early in the morning before the sun came up and went way off by himself. My version says that they searched for him. So they had to go looking around because he didn't quite make a big show of, I'm going off to pray, leave me be. Or I'm going off to pray now. Because praying in the middle of the street was a big thing back then. Or at least we've been given to understand that. So Jesus, again, 180 from tradition, goes off somewhere quiet. Well, we're going to guess that it's quiet. Because they had to actually go looking for him to find him. So it wasn't out in the middle of everybody. And he had a chat with his dad. That sounds like something that we should be in the habit of today too. Pick a time of day. Doesn't have to be morning, but pick a time of day to be off by ourselves and pray. God is good, and I am in a unique position to be able to do this kind of thing when I'm sitting in somebody's yard pulling weeds. Ain't nobody around me. And God and I have lots of good chats round about then. And apparently the ants think I'm delicious. We can do that throughout our day too. When we're off by ourselves, chat with God. Mom had a phenomenal habit when she was driving about 30 years ago. Mommy, you don't drive anymore. But every single red light, she would pray. That was what Mom found, is after she started praying at all the red lights, funny how it was always green lights. Devil didn't want her praying.
Somebody needed prayer, so I would start praying if I hadn't been up to that point.
Yep. We can always find times to be with our Father, to be connected to Him. And He wants that. He wants direct communication with us. It's a healthy habit. Here's something again where Mark is contrasting what the behavior of your typical person would be versus Jesus Christ. So the four who have been identified in Mark as disciples say, everybody's talking about you. Come on, we need to, you need to go out and keep talking to these crowds. Jesus goes, actually, we're going to move on. Instead of just sitting here and absorbing, all the wonderful vibes that we're getting from all the people who are gathering up in this town, we're going to keep rolling to people who haven't heard from me yet. Jesus didn't come to be famous. He knew he was going to end up that way. But that's not why he came here originally. His mission was a lot different. And yet he knew, because gossip is the fastest form of communication on the planet, always has been, that when he went to these other cities, people were going to talk. Some of that talk would actually be useful. Hey, I heard this guy. You need to hear about it. And some of it would not. And the proportion of the good versus the bad, well, that's probably not much different than it is today. Now, the last bit that our lesson has us doing, so we've gone through the first Sabbath, where he has miraculously healed someone or cast out a demon, where he has healed a mother-in-law, where he has healed most of the folk in the town, and now he's moving on. And so we don't know exactly how many days down the road this is, but it says, because it just says, and he went preaching in their synagogues throughout all Galilee and casting out demons. We love Mark, but he is not into setting a lot of exacting detail. Now a leper came to him, imploring him, kneeling down to him and saying, if you are willing, you can make me clean. If you are willing, you can make me clean. So there has been enough time passed that someone with a terminal disease who has been banished from society because he has a terminal disease that sadly spreads, and at this point we don't have penicillin, is coming to him. I know that I already have enough faith in you, Jesus of Nazareth, that if you want to, you can heal me. Then Jesus, moved with compassion, stretched out his hand and touched him, and said to him, I am willing, be cleansed. Two really interesting things are happening in this passage. I wonder if this caught anybody else's ear. First off, he's willing to touch a leper. I mean, this is a communicable disease, and it's a really bad one that nobody could cure. And secondly, the Jewish folks were always really, really fussy about how they used the words I am. Because that is how they spoke about God. The I am. Way back in Exodus, when the burning bush is speaking to Moses, the voice on the burning bush tells him, tell your brother, I am the I am. So the fact that Jesus is saying, I am willing, be cleansed. Jesus was making a declaration there. Our American ears don't hear it quite as well as a Jewish ear, but he was making quite the statement there. And probably most of it is English, which is not the world's greatest language for speaking with a great deal of specificity, but he was declaring, yes, I am God, and I absolutely want to heal you. Does anyone here think that God is different today? Right. He wants to heal us. If we are willing to believe that he wants that, yeah, he absolutely wants that. As soon as Jesus had spoken, immediately the leprosy left him, the guy with the leprosy, and he was cleansed. And Jesus, okay, I'm paraphrasing just a little bit so that the he's in the capital letters can come through the auditory. And Jesus warned the leper and sent him away at once, saying, see that you say nothing to anyone. Go your way, show yourself to the priest, offer your cleansing for those things that Moses commanded as a testimony to them. However, the leper went out, began to proclaim it freely, and spread the matter so that Jesus could no longer openly enter the city, but was outside in the deserted places, and they came to Jesus from every direction. Okay, so this seems kind of odd, doesn't it? In the ear, Jesus goes, okay, don't tell anybody I just saved your life. Okay? Go to the priest, get the priest to declare you clean, do what Moses told you to take to the priest to have yourself declared clean. Got it? What does the leper do? Not that. There was a lot of ritual around leprosy. It wasn't just that you were sick, because way back when, it was not good enough that you were just sick. It was also something spiritual. You were unclean. In a slightly heretical framework, sometimes I wonder if God used unclean to convince the people of that time, no, really, I mean this, do it. So, Jesus is saying, please, pretty please, go make the priest happy, go to him first, do what the rules say, And so, but the leper, no, he's happy, he's thrilled, he's clean. He's going to live. He's allowed to be in society again, only if he had gone the other direction, it probably would have worked better. So, because Jesus has touched this leper, he's unclean until sunset. He's not allowed inside the city gates because he's unclean until sunset. But that doesn't matter. Everyone goes, "Oh, you're there? Fine. We can travel." And away they go. It wasn't quite what Jesus originally envisioned, but funny how when things zig, God can zag. If our original idea of the way something should come about doesn't happen, have faith. Be calm. God's got it. Beware, he has a sense of theater about our lives. And just enjoy the show, because it's going to be something really neat and amazing. Have we ever encountered today, this day and age, where God did something and someone went out and proclaimed it freely? I got to say, those instances are getting less and less. That peer pressure to not talk about God has gotten us really used to not speaking about God. That's unfortunate. That might be something we could work on just a little. I get being diplomatic. I get reading your audience. But the ability to talk about God is pretty darn important. Yes, Mom? I know, I'm watching. And on that note, would you bow your heads with me, please? Dearest Father in heaven, thank you for always being the one in charge who can speak entire worlds into existence and heal us when we are willing to be healed. Dear Lord in heaven, please be with us today and always. Amen. And thank you guys for studying with us. And may you have a happy Sabbath. Remember, it is potluck Sabbath. There is lunch in the fellowship hall after church.